Hi, and welcome to Leading Dragons, our special series with Casey from Hawaii. Hi, Casey. How are you doing?
Aloha, doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being back on the show. So this is a series of 5 around leadership training in the times. So in our first session of this series, we talked about what lies ahead. What lies ahead in 2021 and moving forward. And in this series, we're going to be talking about how we need to go about stepping aside from the chaos. So, Casey, do you want to give a quick recap of what we covered in our last session around what lies ahead?
Okay, what lies ahead? We know for sure climate change is very real. We know for sure climate change is larger than what people will normally accept it to be. We also know that climate change is geophysical change. So for instance, ice loss deformation. So you have trillions of tons of ice on the land. When it melts, what happens to the land? It deforms back up to normal. So that also means it's not just the weather being impacted, it's geophysical. And so that means over the last 10, 20 years, we've been seeing more 9-point earthquakes around the world. It's partially because of the deformation rates changing on the planet because of weather change, climate change. It's like when Mount St. Helens blew up in the 80s, there was a glacier on top of the mountain and an earthquake slid the glacier off. And as soon as the glacier slid off, the mountain went boom and exploded. So there are connections out there that people normally don't make, which is a very real way nature works. Everything is interconnected. And so people tend not to see the dots or connect the dots. So putting that together with political change has been happening too. And a lot of the political change is in response to climate change. So as things get worse, the politics get worse. Okay. The other thing to factor in is our culture has reached a change point. You could say our culture started with the East and West India Company and the first large-scale capitalistic corporations, you could say, and they were brutal. They set the pattern ahead for the next year. They started slavery and a bunch of other brutal for-profit industries, you could say. Well, that culture of that for-profit based system is reaching a breaking point. And part of the breaking point is climate change. Part of the breaking point is it's hit an end. It's beginning to devour itself. And you can see companies beginning to take profit at their own expense. You can see the way nations are hoarding wealth and power, and that is coming to a head. So we've reached an inflection point, and the two inflection points are merging together. So that's a big deal. So the two inflection points that are very clearly up ahead, the 24 elections in America, going to be quite brutal. America is tearing itself apart between its racism, between the profit-based culture, between being a democracy and wanting freedom and to protect the people. All that's coming into conflict.
And how is that impacting the rest of the world?
Well, both good and bad, ironically. When Trump pulled himself out of the world play a lot, that's forcing a lot of countries to step up again to get more serious. So in some respects, it was good for the EU because it forced the EU to come together more cohesively. But in many respects, worse because you're breaking apart the system, which is designed to be global now. And so when you get the bickering going on, you're actually undercutting the global system, trade and profits and economy. So there are multiple impacts going on that. So the disease, COVID, part of climate change. I used to work in disease tracking. We knew something was coming for years. And it was just a question of what. And so COVID isn't the end of things either, as far as it's tuberculosis, still HIV, still other diseases like malaria, which is on the upswing because of COVID, causing international boundaries to close down. So there are a lot of problems piling up. And the trouble is those problems are piling up one at a time while the system is undercutting its own infrastructure for profit. And so as the system slowly undercutting itself for profit, the system's also slowly being undercut by climate change. And so that's adding up. And those changes are becoming slowly worse and worse. So you're seeing more bridge collapses, more railroad collapses in the United States. You're seeing the Lebanon explosion because the infrastructure wasn't being maintained, stuff was being left in the warehouse too long, and boom. And each of these things slowly going off is slowly also making things worse. Russia is having an environmental disaster. Once every 3 months, major environmental disaster. Russia is slowly collapsing. And they're not fixing the problems. The problems are slowly getting bigger and bigger. And so slowly undercutting more and more. So it impacts everything, quite honestly. So 24 elections is going to be really insane. It's going to be a referendum on sanity, you could say. Where's that going to go? Anywhere, but it's going to have shockwaves. The other thing I've been watching, climate change. Now, if you look at the predictions as a scientist, I knew the predictions were too conservative and too linear. I knew there was buffering happening in the ocean. So when I was watching this in the 90s, they're saying, look at this, it isn't happening as fast as we think it should be. My response is ocean buffering. In other words, the system's buffering itself to protect itself. Nature does that. So that fit into the data I had. But the thing is, the data that everyone else had was too conservative. So basically what I did was I took the 2050 predictions and moved them up to 2035 because I knew other feedback mechanisms like the methane releases were happening, which they weren't accounting for, they couldn't account for. So change makes change happen faster. And that's a differential process, which they didn't account for in all their climate change models as accurately as they should have. So I knew that the models, if you use the models as a baseline and accelerate it a little bit, it gave you a more accurate timing of what happened. And I could see that when I did that, and I could actually literally match it to ice extents in the Arctic and stuff like that, that my sped up model based on the original data was actually pretty accurate. We're seeing an acceleration of that. And so because of that acceleration, for instance, I was expecting the United States to go into a dictatorship in 2024 based on the various factors. And even though I knew the 2016 elections were going to be crazy, we did get Trump, and Trump is a start dictator. So that told me my model was 8 years, actually had to be accelerated by 8 years, just because events were speeding up. And likewise, you can see the climate change events, the fires this year are speeding up. So that means the 2035 number I originally had has been slowly moved up to 2027. And in fact, in the literature I just read this a week ago, scientists have said 2027 is going to be the major inflection point now. So they're actually catching up to the stuff I've been tracking finally. So 2027 is the inflection point of climate change, where it becomes so real, people can't ignore it anymore. 2020 is the first year people kind of go, we get it, this is real, but they can still ignore it. The fire in Australia killing billions of animals. The fires in the United States covering the entire country in smoke. The pandemic, because COVID is from climate change, from the animals and humans getting closer together, interactions being forced together because of climate change, and the system getting more hungry and devouring the planet fast. That collision created COVID. So ironically, COVID is a symptom of climate change. So anyway, 27 is when not only is it real, but we really have to deal with it much more aggressively, and the impacts are going to be much greater than people realize. So that's change. Okay. Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. So we've got these two pivot points that we're looking up ahead, and I see this as, you know, whilst it's very macro, what is it that we can, you know, as individuals and individuals working in organizations, what is it that we can choose to do? So as we connected for today's session, Casey, I said, yeah, you know what, I think that the word here for today's session is choice. We can choose. Did we choose last year in 2020 to hunker down? Or did we choose to look at the adversity in the face and start preparing for the uncertainty and the ambiguity ahead? Or did we choose to hide under the blanket, you know, and pretend and keep going and keep doing what we've always done because we're not sure what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if we did, judgment aside, 2021 is the year to actually to lift your head above the blanket and go, right, now we're going to start looking. Choice. We need to start looking about what's really happening. Obviously, it can be, I can imagine, you know, you as a dot connector and a data tracker, I can imagine there must be some days where you feel overwhelmed.
That's a true statement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's an understatement, did you say?
It's a true statement. In fact, that's one of the problems. The people who do watch the data, they tend to get so overwhelmed, they stop trying because they don't see an answer out.
Yeah.
And the truth is, if we do nothing, we get nothing. If we don't choose to act, we get nothing. We get the default process, and the default process is collapse. Collapse isn't a bad thing. If you have a forest and a tree collapses, it might be bad for the tree, but it's good for the surrounding area as an opportunity to grow into a new forest.
So you
So
just put
again,
in the, yeah,
opportunity.
exactly. So like just what you said in the same sentence, chaos is opportunity.
Yes.
So and I think this is let's just pause there, because it's all very good and well for us to say these are the pivot points, this is what's going to be happening in the next few years, and we're not talking decades here, so it's literally tomorrow. Start planning and prepping. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to focus on. But before we even go into that, I like to say that we're not machines, and every day is a different day for us. And sometimes we bring the best versions of ourselves to the day, and there are other days where we bring less of the best version of ourselves to the day. And we talk about overwhelm and which chaos can bring, which leads us to that space of us individuals as conscious leaders, as self-aware leaders. What is it? It's ultimately the fear. So the overwhelm around what you've been, how you've been talking and describing the two pivot points that are coming up in 2024 and 2027. Yeah, that can stir up anxiety, stress, worry, doubt, uncertainty. So I would like to take that first piece, the first piece of today's session, which is stepping aside of the chaos, and go, you know what? We're all going to feel fear, and we're all going to have to work with it. So, Casey, tell us a little more about fear and how we can start working with it.
So fear is a natural instinct. It's there to help keep us alive. Because it's there to help keep us alive, for instance, if we see a cliff, we fear the cliff. Why? Because we could fall off and hurt ourselves and then die. So negative things take us out. And because of that, fear evolves to help us avoid negative things. That means as Homo sapiens, we're wired to pay attention to fear more than positivity, which means it takes, for instance, 10 good responses to undo one bad response in a review, because people pay attention to that one bad response. So the one thing we have to be aware of is we're wired to pay attention to fear. So if we're about to go into a situation which is really bad, our fear can paralyze us. It can stop us from doing action. And what did I say earlier? If you do nothing, you get nothing. So if your fear paralyzes you, you get nothing. Now, what fear gives us, the good thing that fear gives you is it pauses you. So you walk up to the cliff, the fear strikes in, and you pause for a second. That pause is a moment of action, because in that pause, you take in information to decide what to do. So it's okay to have a fear response initially to pause you. And that gives you something to look at and go, here's my opportunity. This cliff is not something I'm going to fall against. It is an opportunity to work against it because this is a changing landscape. So let me use this. And let's be honest, a lot of people will not use that cliff as an opportunity. They will stop and wait for other people to build a bridge over the cliff. Trouble is, we can't wait for other people to build that bridge. That's part of our job now. As conscious dragon leaders, we're the ones who build the bridges.
Yeah,
So we just can't wait.
Yeah, and it's like, so what you're saying is, you know, fear is here for a reason. It's like a data source.
You use it.
So let's use it to our advantage. And so often, you know, when we're stuck, or we feel, you know, stifled, and we're blocked, and we're indecisive, we're faced with a dilemma, and then we just never make decisions. And this happens in organizations over and over and over again. And we have to have another meeting. We need to get XYZ at the table to make any decisions. That's all the fear part. So fear is a data source.
I have to move.
Okay.
Turns out.
Sure.
So you're gonna have to edit this out for a second.
Okay, no worries.
I set myself up in the wrong location. Julie actually has to teach a class, and I sat up right outside her class spot.
Well, you're showing us your beautiful garden.
That's kind of funny. Okay.
So fear is a data source, and let's make that choice. I go back to the word choice. We can choose to use it to our advantage. Okay, so
yes.
That's easily said than done. And then from there, once we got the data from the source, from the fear, how can we move from the contracted, that contraction, the contracted energy, to start expanding our energy and move? Because, like you said, we can be hit with paralysis, and then that's why so many of us hunkered down last year, because we were scared. We were scared of what the pandemic really meant. We were trying to hang on to our comfort zones, what's familiar to us. Now that's something of the past, right? So, and going back to being the conscious leader, the conscious leader who's self-aware and is aware that, fear does that to energy. And the innovative thinking that we need to start using and start building that muscle to start finding new solutions to the chaos that's happening and unfolding. What can we do? What do we need to do with fear to start moving outwards and start expanding our energy and using it to our advantage?
Okay, the first thing is we have to do some counterintuitive things. The way we're wired to act instinctually isn't going to serve us in the way we have to act against the challenges we face. So the first thing is pause. You are going to take action, but the first action is pausing, taking in the information, taking account for what's happening around you. Second step, a lot of people will try to stop people from going off the cliff. And the momentum of those individuals, organizations are going to be bigger than you. If you try to stop that momentum, you're just going to be taken off the cliff with them. So the first step is action is actually step to the side first, to take account of the flows in play that are interacting with that cliff, interacting with that challenge, that chaos. And I call it, don't be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's going to be one of the most deadly things for any of us as dragon leaders to be. If you're in the wrong battle, no, you're not going to win that situation. If you're in a situation which is far greater than what you can undo as a leader, you're going to have to be wise to step aside to it, to reposition yourself.
Do you want to give us an example?
A good example is, say you're an international company, and I have some clients like this, and they're working with the United States. And you see the United States begin pulling out of your business, and you're trying to do business in the United States. And so your first reaction is to work with them more, to try to do more business with them, or to fix things. But the momentum of the United States is getting more insular, it's getting more isolated. And the more you will try to do to work with that the company would have done to work with the United States, the more money they would have sunk and the more money they would have lost, because that was the wrong response. The right response is, for them, working with the United States was not the right response. The right response is to step out of that contract, let the United States business go to the side, and refocus on new customers in another spot, which did want to connect to them, to build up more infrastructure and let the United States become insulated for a while and wait for them to get to a position where they want to work with you.
Yeah.
Because that flow in the United States was so powerful, so insular, when it was turning into the embargoes and all that trade tariff wars and becoming more racist and more problematic, it was harder to do business with the United States. And they weren't going to change that. So it was better to pull out, even though it was a slight hit up front. Now, in this next year, they're going to be able to go back in because the climate's changed and they wouldn't have lost as much.
So this goes back to the previous conversation that we had, which was, choose resistance or choose to be adaptive. And so in that particular example, resisting was like actually not accepting that, oh my gosh, we're going to maybe have to hold off from growing business with our American partners. No, let's keep banging on the same door until we finally get the business that we are aiming for.
Right.
And versus, being adaptive, which is, accepting the situation, accepting, and then moving around it and refocusing. We're going back to the word choice, right? So it's choice again, isn't it? So what is it that whatever we focus on expands? And
well, let's look at that. When you said that, in the United States example, when the United States began becoming more insular and the company had to leave the United States for business, there was a new option in the chaos. Rather than chasing an American business, chase the business of the other companies that are getting isolated from the United States and connect to them.
Yeah.
And so there was a whole new market that opened up in the insular nature of what was happening in the United States.
Yeah.
And so there was an opportunity. And if they focus on trying to make it work in one place, they would have missed the actual opportunity that was being stirred up by the chaos.
Yeah. So it's breaking our paradigms of thinking, the way that we see things and the assumptions that we make, and moving away, in an agile manner, and finding new ways, new thinking ways, new ways of solving problems that are new to us. And it goes back to the resistance piece, isn't it? We're kind of like we're creatures of habit, and it's all very easy for us to say, yeah, just break the way that you change your thinking patterns, find new ways. You can't solve a new problem with old thinking patterns. But it's hard to do that, and I think we're going to have to move. All of us are going to have to start. I mean, we started last year, right, with the pandemic. And the mass change of everything, the way that we consume, the way that we go about our daily lives, the way that we work with each other. So let's go back to stepping aside of the chaos. So it's recognizing, even just I mean, you can step aside of the chaos once you recognize that the chaos is there. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so we've hunkered down enough as it is in 2020. So let's look at the chaos in the face. And chaos brings up fear, anxiety, overwhelm, and all that. So you said, yeah, so first thing is to pause, and we can use fear as a data source and leverage from that. And stepping aside of the chaos means it's actually changing direction. Oh, wow. So hang on a minute. You're telling me that I've got to change my vision.
Or be patient.
Or be patient.
Yeah, to work with it. It's more complicated. But as you pause, you want to get a good handle of the forces in play. So you can use those forces in play as much as what you see ahead of you. And so there's a lot you can still do. And because a lot of people aren't doing anything because they're being paralyzed by the fear, or they're hunkering down to wait it out, ironically, everyone hunkering down to wait it out, this means there's more room for you to do something, because it's reducing your competition. So as long as you don't waste your energy trying to stir people up in a fight that you won't win, but be smart to use the energy that's happening to do something with that.
Mm.
There's a lot you could do with that situation, it turns out. You just have to make sure you don't think in a past-oriented way or try to be a savior, because saviors actually aren't appreciated a lot in companies because you're changing the way they're doing business. They don't want you to be a savior. They just want you to keep the bottom line up in the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different.
Mm-hmm. So there's so let's go into that side of being the individual leading dragon, and then being an organization, an entity, and how do we as conscious leaders, what do we need to start doing today to start preparing and start planning for the pivot times ahead, when we decide to step aside of that chaos?
So first step, wherever you are, be realistic. Is the company that you're part of, is it a company that's got the depth and the flexibility to work with what you have here? Or is it a company that's toxic? In other words, if you're in a toxic company, you're not going to fix things. So it is a good time to reposition oneself, is the first truth. If you're in a losing situation in a toxic company, switch, change it up. In other words, it's not the time to save those companies anymore. Second thing, once you decide you're in a place that isn't bad, now you have a place that you could do something in. And now you may look like you have buy-in because maybe your company heads are going, wow, we need to change. Truth is, people don't like to change.
Mm-hmm.
So talk is cheap, as the saying goes. And you have to actually make sure whenever you start being a leader, you get not only buy-in, but you look at the actions that follow the words. You make sure the actions are following what you are laying out for your vision, that the actions are being supportive rather than neutral. If the actions are neutral, not supporting you, there's a problem.
Mm.
So even neutral actions aren't enough. You want buy-in that's actually proactive rather than negative or neutral.
Okay.
Okay.
So as a conscious leader, okay, we'll be choosing to make the change, starting with where we are at. Okay. And the comfort choice is to stay where we are. Okay, rather than taking the leap of faith. So everyone's, I'm generalizing, but most of us, 99.99% of the population's choice is okay, I want to stay where I am. And so what happens, the dangers there is that we could be making assumptions, and it's being able to see the company for what it really is, the environment for what it really is. And that's a piece of work in itself. And like you say, the word that pops into our mind is consistency. Are they really being consistent? Because if you're inside that organization and you've made the choice to make the change that's necessary to move into to reinvent oneself and to reinvent, to keep the company afloat, we need consistency. And so how long does it take, for each one of our conscious leaders to recognize whether it's ready for change and will go with you, or whether it will backfire?
3 months. 3 months. Because you can see it in the way that people hold emotions. In other words, when you finally decide, okay, this is where I'm going to make a difference, this is the process I'm going to put into play, you're not going to get immediate buy-in because it takes 3 months to change emotional attachments. So all your employees, all the bosses, it'll take them 3 months to really choose whether this direction is where they want to go or not. So after 3 months of working through your change process, or getting this stuff implemented, if it's been neutral the entire time, and after 3 months they're still neutral, you have a problem actually. You have to change up the way you're doing it. You're going to have to go through another 3-month process until you get the buy-in. In other words, if after 3 months you don't have excitement, you don't have true buy-in, and you see the true buy-in in the actions and the way you're being supported, then you need to revisit and go through another 3-month cycle to revise it to be more accurate to your culture or your company. If it's negative support you're getting after 3 months, walk away.
Get out. Yeah.
Get out. Just get out at that point, because it's not worth it anymore. So you can see everyone assumes everything there, because everyone will be saying, oh, you're doing great, rah, rah, rah. They're going to be saying to you, you're doing great. And behind the scene, they might be backstabbing you.
Yeah.
But you could see the backstabs. You could see the little sabotages. And if that's happening, which happens a lot, Deborah and I both have many stories of this happening to both of us. So you know what? You can see this. And you know what? It's not time to put up with that. It's not time to try to push through those solutions.
Yeah. It's time to face the reality of where we are and where we want to focus our energy. And this goes back to choice. It's choice, 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 choice. Yeah. And
but most dragon leaders, once they're leading, they won't give up. They will want to make it work. So if they're getting that negative feedback, they're going to actually work even harder to try to make it work. And that's the wrong response in this case. In other words, at that point, go to an environment which is going to make the distance, rather than one that is going to sink into turmoil and chaos. So yes, that sounds a little ruthless, but if a third of businesses are going to go under in the next few years, after COVID, look how many businesses have went under, quite a few still. And where I live, 15,000 businesses have closed their doors on my little state, on an island of 100,000 people. I mean, small businesses, but still, it's quite dramatic, the impact. So no company is going to be immune to that. So we have to be realistic.
And it's accelerated change. So, now push comes to shove. Now it's crunch time. And there's no more time to hunker down or to just sit in fear, in dilemma, in indecisiveness, in overthinking. Now it's time to actually start preparing, and just like you say, okay, give it about those 3 months, and start planning. And if we don't see the consistency, if you've got like a super duper change plan and you present it and it looks like you've got buy-in, and then you start seeing things that are going a bit sideways, or there's a bit of like inconsistent behavior between what people say and what people are actually doing. It's like, wow, okay, you know what? That's a signal in itself. And it takes me back to a few months before I burnt out in the organization that I served, because I was making assumptions. I really wanted to make it work, and I had everyone, aligned, and it's that kind of like, come on, I can pull this together. We're going to pull it off. We're going to be like the best. This big project that we're working on, and it's like, and that burnt me out, because as a leading dragon, it goes back to energy. I think I just burnt out from being burnt in. I used too much of my energy, and I just kept trudging through and bringing everyone together and keeping at it.
So we can gauge that, and we're going to have to be more aware of using that process of gauging it and choosing not to burn out on the bad projects, and finding the places which will actually grow with you. And so we can be selective. The other consideration that you're going to have to do as a conscious dragon leader is be very aware of your organization. Everything we're talking about, the answer is going to change depending on the type of organization you're in. If you're working for a governmental agency, it's very different than working for a corporation. And the momentum of each type of organization is vastly different. And you have to account for that. And so especially as you leap from one type of organization to the next, make sure you adapt to the new organization you do leap into. It does make a difference. And chances are a lot of the dragon leaders are going to be changing organization types. A lot of dragons who working in industry may go work for government. Well, they're going to discover a big change. If a lot of dragons who are working in business might become a small business now. And the realities change at that point. So be aware to be conscious of the dynamics of the type of organization you're in more than ever.
Yeah, and I hear dynamics as energy, isn't it? So it's readjusting our energy with the energy and the essence around us. And that's an art in itself, isn't it? It's like a balancing act.
It is. So what's really good is the next 2 years are going to be relatively light. The next 2 years are a really good time for us to position ourselves. The next 2 years is a good time to get insight from what has happened, to look ahead a little bit and reposition oneself. So it's a really good time to reposition ourselves as dragon leaders. It's a really good time to find a spot that resonates with you. It's a really good time to jump sideways, which is counterintuitive because as unemployment is getting worse, you would think I should hunker down on my job. I've been actually helping my dragon students change jobs right now, and a lot more job changes right now than normal. The best time to change a job is at the beginning of the major unrest or downturns while you can still get a job, not a few years after everything's been taken away.
Because you missed the window of opportunity. You're like at the end of the wave, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
I've helped several VPs and stuff reshift right now, where normally they would have hunkered down. And it's like, nope, time to reshift. And they're doing even better now because of it. Because it's opening up the chance to go to those better opportunities where they are willing to work with you.
So it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you said, it's counterintuitive. So we're doing the opposite of what our gut is telling us to do.
Yes.
Because we're deciding to be to stand in our power and move with the strategy. So we're going back to stepping aside of the chaos. So number one, recognizing the chaos. Okay, is it there? Is it not there? And just evaluating the different facets of the chaos. Number two, okay, so what does stepping aside mean? Does it mean staying in the company, or actually does it mean, getting out?
Right.
And preparing for what's ahead. And also, and this brings us back to, that leap of faith, because there is a lot of ambiguity, the unknown, a lot of uncertainty, and the VUCA world is just going to get bigger, right? The landscape is shifting on all different levels, and we're just going to have to dance with it. And you, Casey, you've been teaching me for over a year now about pacing ourselves.
And so this year, even though we may not be able to do as much in our chosen company or where we want to make a difference, we can actually get stronger ourselves. We can reposition ourselves. Everyone's going stir crazy in the pandemic right now. And so instead of going stir crazy, make it a more monastic experience, go a little deeper on yourself, get a little better shape. So that way, when things are slowly opening up again, which they are slowly opening up right now, not everywhere, but slowly opening up, it gives you a chance to dive in and make a difference. And, it's a full new reality. Yeah. I have 2 airline pilot neighbors. Their reality is they're not going to get another job. The whole travel industry is going to shift over the next 10 years. It's not going to go back to what it was. And they won't be able to outwait it to get another job. For them, it's retirement time and create a whole new career, actually, rather than wait it out.
Yeah, and it's funny that you're talking about the 2 airline pilots, because I was at the local farm the other day with my daughter Selma, and we walked in, and that's where we buy all our vegetables, our eggs, cheeses, other dairy products. and fresh bread too. And when we walked in, so we're obviously speaking English, but we're living in Switzerland where they speak French. And there's one of the ladies. There were two, a man and a woman who were there who I hadn't met them before, and the lady just started speaking English to Selma, and so we got talking, and it was actually her and her husband who were running the farm, and they were two airline pilots who that were furloughed. And we just said, wow, that's just, 1 minute you're flying a plane and now you're harvesting the crops and preparing the the produce, the land produce, to be sold to the locals. And I was like, that's beautiful. It's just it's like repurposing. We're going to have to like think like way beyond our immediate horizon of what we are capable of doing.
And there's the truth. People are past oriented. The majority, 70% of individuals, we base the future on the past. And the fundamental problem is our future doesn't look anything like the last 20 years. But most people will hunker down and they think what's up ahead will look like what looked 5 years behind us. And it's not going to look like that at all. All those airline pilots, whole new careers, whole new lifestyles. If they wait, they're just going to hurt themselves. If they're proactive, get healthy, begin creating something new, they're going to do great. In fact, they're going to be ahead of the crowd because everyone else is waiting. Big difference. And so don't worry about what's after 2024. Don't worry about what's after 2027. It doesn't matter what's ahead. What matters is we know it's an inflection point. That's what matters. We know the inflection point timings pretty precisely. I've known about those inflection points for a decade. Did I go out to warn people? No, what I did was I went out and kindly taught people how to be stronger. And so when COVID hit, a lot of my students called back and go, oh, this is what you were talking about. I'm like, yep. And they go, this is no problem at all. And they just went into COVID with no problem. They actually loved it because they were ready for it, because the training already prepared them for it. We didn't know exactly when it was going to hit or anything. Rather, we were already changing the way we were living. So it didn't matter that it hit us because we were ahead of the inflection point. So when the inflection point hit, it just went under us and we continued to move ahead. So the trick is, we know the bumps are there. Trick is, we don't have to hit the bump. We can go around it. We can work around it. We can plan for that.
Yeah, we can ride that wave.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's true for all of us.
Shift. Yeah. So the paradigms are, the old paradigms are becoming obsolete, and it's for us to make the choice. This goes back to the beginning of today's session, which is, it's for us, each one of us, to make a choice. How do we want to go about what lies ahead for us? How do we want to start shifting the way that we do things, the way that we see things? And where is the grip of fear, and how can we release it? How can we use it as a data source to our advantage? And what, to the dragon listeners, what does stepping aside of the chaos mean to you?
And instead of trying to figure out what's ahead of the chaos, look at the opportunities being exposed and then work against those opportunities. And that will take you through into the new times. So a case of the international company trying to do business in the United States, the business slowly going away. It said there's fear there. Then the opportunity is, well, if the business is going away for you, well, isn't it going away for everyone else? And what are all those other people to the side doing? So now, instead of concentrating on that fear, oh, I'm losing in the United States, you turn around to look at the opportunity. All these other people who need to do business, and I'm around to do business with them, so let's connect up. Now they're getting stronger again and moving ahead during an economic downturn. They don't need to worry about what's up ahead a year from now because they're actually thriving in the opportunities being driven by the chaos.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a visionary. You can be proactive and take advantage of the opportunities coming up.
So let's take a leap of faith. Let's move away from the contracted energy that where fear holds us,
Mm-hmm.
and move into a place where of abundance rather than scarcity, and expand our energy, and where we'll start spotting new opportunities, and step aside of the chaos. Casey,
Mm-hmm.
thank you very much. It's lovely seeing you today.
Much love, and much love to everyone listening.
Yeah, and see you
Be
next time.
aloha.
Aloha.